grab me a beer and grab him a coke. We bout to sit for an hour, bullshit and tell jokes. And please don't mix it up, cause he done sobered up. Brandon T Comedy on your social media feeds. And Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. I'm your host, Brennan Tassif. If you are new to the show, quick rundown of the show. One of my favorite things when I used to drink and party was to hang out with friends, talk shit, talk shop, tell stories. I am sober now, but one of my favorite things to do is still be a good drinking buddy, or ex-drinking buddy in this case. I will normally be joined by a guest. Today is no exception. I am joined by a very funny comedian all the way from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Jake Head. What's up?
Hey, man? How you doing?
Good, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have you on. Plug everything up front. I know you had an album that just came out. Let everybody know where they can find everything.
I got an album. It's called Mild Cat. We recorded it in Atlanta at Wonder Comedy, which is a fantastic show whenever we're allowed to go outside again. Check that out if you're ever in Atlanta. You can get it wherever. Just from my own wallet standpoint, maybe check out Bandcamp. The revenue shares a little better. I don't know if you've ever looked into that, but like if you play it on Spotify, which is obviously, you know, I use Spotify when I'm like, oh, I should listen to my friend's album. You get 0.006 cents per track. So you're like, oh, I want to support my friend. I want to listen to their album. If you listen to the entire album, you might give them 1 cent.
Oh, wow.
Whereas like if you buy the album on a platform like Bandcamp, it's much better. Or if you just stream it on Bandcamp, it's much better, much better.
Okay, yeah, because I actually, as soon as it came out, I got it on iTunes. So was that?
Yeah, iTunes fine. It's not. It's Bandcamp. Bandcamp's like whole thing is it's designed to be ethical to artists. Like iTunes is fine, and it's like iTunes. I'm sure Beyonce is getting giant checks from iTunes, but like I'm not getting a giant. Yeah, I'm doing, but I also didn't sell very many albums, so it's like it's not like I don't want to constantly be like, "Where's the money?" Because like there is no money. It's not. Yeah, Spotify's not shortchanging me. There's no money.
We do this for the love of the game.
Yeah, I should be getting $5, and I'm getting like 5 cents. And so it's like, whose problem is that really? That's really my problem. I should sell more albums. But anyway, like that's what Bandcamp's whole appeal is, and they're doing a lot of initiatives. But like Spotify's like starting to Spotify in response to this, you know, it's starting to get out that they don't pay very much, and now they've added like you can donate to charity from an artist. So if you're on Beyonce might be like, hey, donate to Blue Cross or whatever, and you can just donate right on the thing. But you can also donate directly to the artist. So like smaller artists,
sort of a thing.
Yeah, but they did it under the guise of like charity. Yeah. But it's like, this is the only way you're ever going to get paid from Spotify is if somebody, you know, gives you money directly.
A charitable donation.
Yeah, it's like a charitable donation to the artist you're listening to because they're poor. Yeah, that's basically what they've rolled out. But
okay, where else are you on social media?
Twitter and Instagram.
Is it all Jake Head?
Jake Head. I think I'm Jake Marshall Head on Instagram. I can't remember. Okay. But if you just type in Jake Head, it'll be me. It'll be me and the handsome other Jake Head.
I was going to say you and the comedic actor from Boston.
Yeah, he's from Boston. He seems he kind of looks like he would play my older brother. He looks like he's just like he's got reddish hair and he looks like a kind of like a quarterback. Yeah. But he's from Boston.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, he looks like he's got a big build. Like he's definitely. I think he had played a quarterback in a movie. I loosely follow his career as I assume he follows mine. We follow each other on social media and stuff.
Do you really? That's awesome.
Yeah, we never really like talk, but like every once in a while, I'll be like, "Oh, look, he's doing something," and every once in a while, he'll like one my thing. But he seems like a good dude. But he lives in LA, but he's like from Boston or outside Boston.
What else is new with those LA people?
Yeah, they're always up to something.
So you how long have you been doing comedy?
Dude, I fucking like every year I try and like figure out when I started, and it was like sometime in either late 2009, sometime in 2010, so like
Okay.
10 years. It's
Yeah.
definitely over 10 years at this point, but every time I'm like, oh wow, I have 12 years. It's like someone like Chris Buck or
Yeah.
something. It's like, no, you haven't been doing it that long. It just feels like forever.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
I
I think it's
understand
about
that.
10 years.
So
We started in Jax.
that's what I was just about to ask you. You started, that's our
Mhm.
connection, is you are originally from Jacksonville. So
Mhm.
we've done a couple shows together. You were in town for the homecoming show. We did that
Oh yeah. Was that yeah, that was
was
cool at
2 years ago.
Eraser.
Yeah,
Eraser Records. That was 2 years ago. Oh
I
my
think. Or
god.
yeah, it had to have been 2 years ago because
No,
we've
I
been in the
think you're
pandemic for a
right.
year. It was
Ugh.
December of
It
19.
was December. That's why it feels
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
we had
Yeah.
Matt Anderson, the
God.
owner of Eraser Records. He's been on the podcast before.
Oh, he was so cool. Such a
Yeah,
nice guy.
yeah, we're trying to get comedy going back again there, but obviously
That'd be
with everything
sick.
going on. Yeah.
Yeah, that place isn't huge,
No,
but
but
that's
they have a whole outside apparently that no one knew about or thought about until the
oh
pandemic
shit.
hit, and he was like, "Oh, we've got this whole back area."
Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, he showed me like the area they used to like jam and stuff, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a
But
sick setup. It's a really cool place. But when you started, this was interesting to me because you started in Jacksonville. I started in South Florida, as the listeners know. But did you start doing comedy because you loved comedy, or you just because like we had Topher Matheson on? I don't know if you've ever met him, but
mhm.
he
Yeah.
talked about like he kind of started because Joey Nickel was always at his comic book shop and kind of like pushed him to do it. And then
Oh, cool.
yeah, but then there are people like Crespo, myself, Buck to an extent where it's just like, no, like this is what I want to do. So we like
Yeah.
sought it out. How did you get started? And especially because
Um
Jax doesn't have a huge scene. It's a bigger scene, but
yeah,
it's not
it
huge.
was way smaller when we started, man, I
Yeah.
tell you. I always loved comedy. I was a big Comedy Central guy. I
Yeah.
love Comedy Central Presents. That was
Yep.
like my really small group of friends. That was like our thing. Like every Friday, a new presents would drop, and we'd be like,
I
"Oh,
used to
what'd you
record
think
them
of
on
that?"
VHSs.
Oh wow, yeah,
Yeah.
those. I mean, I love those. I love the production value. I loved how like they the stages they used to build, like, oh, you would have like a pinball machine, you could
Yeah.
build a set behind you,
Yep.
and then they went away from that. It was still cool. They just felt like such a cool, because you like, I didn't follow comedy, and I don't think you could when we it was harder when we were younger to like follow comedy that was under Comedy Central, because you're too young to go to clubs. YouTube wasn't so much of a thing, so like
At
there was
all,
only
yeah.
way, and podcasts weren't a thing. So the only way that you would be presented with a new comedian was Comedy Central. So you'd
Yeah.
be like, it would be like, here's Greg Giraldo, and you'd be like, I don't know who this is, and they they're amazing, so they
Mitch
blow your
Hedberg.
mind.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Mitch Hedberg. I mean, like we remember Dimitri Martin was
Yep.
really big with my friend group. Hedberg was huge. We liked we liked the comedy.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we fell in through like we liked movies. We liked the stand-up aspect of it, and I loved bits. I was
Yeah,
such a
that
fan
was
of bits.
my favorite thing too. I get a lot of shit because, but it's like you're saying, like that's how we were exposed to it. So every
Mhm.
Friday I would set my VCR to record it.
Yeah.
I would watch it every Friday. And I get a lot of shit from people now, it being, almost 20 years later from watching those things. But a
Mhm.
lot of people give me shit because one of the first ones that stuck out in my mind was that Dane Cook one.
I was gonna say that. Yeah, when Dane Cook had
When
those
he
presents,
pulls his shirt off and pours the water on him
unbelievable.
and he's doing the alien thing.
Yeah,
Dude,
unbelievable.
it's funny because in Harmful as Swallowed, he talks about being a firefighter and he's like, I want to do that. And it's funny because that's when I saw that, this was 20 years ago, but I saw that and my first thought was, I want to do that.
Yeah,
Like what he's doing, like being a
Yeah.
rock star on stage, like, but
Yeah.
doing comedy.
my
And-
favorite comedian from that era at that time was Nick Swardson,
Yeah.
and he's like the same thing. It's like, has Nick Swardson aged well? Like, I don't know, maybe not. But when you're in high school, it's the funniest shit, And
Yeah.
it's the same with Dane Cook. It's like, are the bits like, high minded and like, oh, that's a good bit. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe
No.
not, but they're hilarious, and it's like they're just in your face and just so like pop,
Yeah.
it's just like sugar candy.
Yeah.
And it's like you're just
exactly.
having a good time, and it doesn't. And then obviously, I liked Chappelle. I liked people who are doing bigger things, but like that was the stuff that like really got me into it. And it was just the Nick Swartzen talking about hanging out with his grandma because he everything he does, you feel like she's like blown away with how strong he is and stuff. And he's like lifting up a gallon of milk.
Oh my
and it's
God,
like,
you're so strong.
Nicholas. Yeah, like all those little things. It's like that was it for me. That was the introduction. And then obviously I, fell in love with it and found other people like Maria Bamford or the other people who are like, now I'm like, who do I still love Hedberg. I still love Bamford, all these people. And then like, but I still like Dane Cook and I still like Nick Swartzen because it's like what they meant to me then. I just have such a big appreciation of it. I just love stand up. Like I'm not one of these people who like any one special I'm going to watch on Netflix. I don't do that anymore. But if I was to like casually come upon it, like I'll enjoy almost anyone's special. If it's garbage, it's garbage. I'm not like, but like I can get into someone who's like, this may not be my cup of tea, but like I can watch them work and I enjoy it. So like I just love stand-up comedy. And it's like that aspect of it, that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. We were actually talking about this before we started recording, but like when we do shows, a lot of times I'll sit in the audience and people are like, why don't you like go to the bar, like sit in the green room? And it's like, no, I like comedy. Like, I want to see what these people have to say.
Definitely.
It's weird.
I feel the same way.
It's weird because it's this kind of almost maturing. I don't know if that's the right word, but like to be introduced to stand up, like you said, through Dane and through like Nick and through some of those Comedy Central presents, which were silly, but that's why I enjoyed them when I was younger because they were silly. But then as I've grown and matured and like had experiences and stuff, now I value. It's funny because I get into this not argument but discussion, especially with Crespo a lot. The value of darker material because my entire set now is based off of stories about being an alcoholic in rehab and jail and so it's weird because the thing that introduced me to stand up is very, like you said, almost like sugar candy, like it's very poppy, and none of my stand up is anything like that at all.
I heard this. I think I read it in David Byrne's book, How Music Works. He's like basically going on this super autistic thing about how sound and a band's sound develops from where they play. So all these bands that were playing at CBGB back in the day, it was a really bad, small L-shaped space. So you had to play loud, you had to play loud. And so all these bands were playing loud and just, they needed to sound interesting enough to get the New York crowd, but they also needed to play loud. And I feel like comedy's like that too. I feel like in certain clubs have a way of defining the type of comedy that works there. Like I'm a huge fan of Cincinnati comedy, and they have a great club called Go Bananas. And every comedian that comes through Go Bananas and comes up in Go Bananas has like the most interesting premises that are so punchy and like productive, but are so unique and like would not have come from a bar show. They're like longer setups. They're interesting. You maybe will hang because that club is so patient and you can really set up odd things as long as it's good. And it's like that, that's like that. I think Chicago has like a unique style of comedy that's like very fun and very like, because Chicago is such a drinky town. So like the comedy that comes out of there is so like revelrous. It's so like, I don't know if that's revel, they are having fun, but it's also good because it's also like a wide, like almost a majority black city. So you're going to have like the like instant gratification of like a black audience met with that revelry. So it's just such good comedy comes out of there. And I feel like that's the case with most scenes. And I feel like Jacksonville has a way of, you're doing shows at the beach, you're doing shows in Jax, you're doing shows in front of people who listen to, butt rock, music. And you have a way of like shaping your act to like kind of fit that and kind of figure out how to work with that. And I feel like a lot of comedians that come out of Jax, are like that. It's like almost this, you have to be like a professor to drunk people and you have to kind of figure out how to do smart shit dumb, but like in a dumb way.
Oh my God, it's so weird you say that. That's exactly how I feel. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is like some of the material. I'm like, no, I know this is good, but no one's paying attention.
And
that
so was something I felt
work it out.
That's why I felt like I was like, I appreciate this, and it really helped me figure out how to do well, you know, or how to do well enough to feel like good about myself. and then when I went to Atlanta, it was like a kind of a different thing, because it was people that were maybe a little bit more attentive and maybe a little bit more cultured. So you could do things that maybe you couldn't do in Jax. And that was, for me at that time, really freeing. You know, I felt like, oh, I can really expand here and figure out what I do. And then in Atlanta, there's the big show that just ended with Star Bar. And Star Bar is a weekly show, unbelievable show. And it was at a rockabilly punk bar. And it had been going for 10 years. And it's just a Monday night, always packed, always smoke filled drinking, but like really good comedy flew there. It was weird. It wasn't, it is somewhere where you felt like it had this reputation of being a hard room. And it was just like, it wasn't hard. It was just like different, you know, like if you were doing cool stuff, they were into it, and they were really into it. And you kind of had to win them over.
Higher,
Yeah. And it's like, if you did worse, it was obvious there. I think that's what people said when they say it's a hard room. It's like, if you're going to bomb, it's going to be obvious here. If you're going to do well, it's going to be obvious here. And that's what I loved about it. And I had the privilege of getting up there every week. And that kind of shifted the way I did stand up, where it was like, everything you do has to be good, and you better bring it. And you have to have this level of presentation for it that, you know, it's yours. Because if you were just doing whatever stuff there, you would kind of do okay. But like, if you had something that was yours and you presented it well, they would like really reward you for it.
Yeah.
And then that was what I feel like, that's where I figured out how to do comedy the way I wanted to do comedy, was in Atlanta at Star Bar.
So you went to you went from Jacksonville to Atlanta?
Yeah, I did. I was in Jacksonville for the better part of 3 years, maybe like 2.5 years, for doing stand up. And then I met Jared Harris, who was at the time, he was like a traveling road comic, and that he had just moved to LA. So his place was like open. Actually, it was his grandma's house. His grandma just passed away, and he had been living, and we had lived in a 55 and over retirement home. And so I was living there kind of under the radar, but like, you know, paying him whatever to live there. And then, being able to get up from Jacksonville to Atlanta was big.
Did you do that because of stand up? You were just like, I want to.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because I had been there once. I had been there once just on a trip, because I had heard that the Laughing Skull was, you know, this great club.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, I was like, well, I'll just do a weekend trip to try and see what Atlanta's like. And I was blown away. I was like, this is amazing. Like, it felt like the way that their, you know, their senior class of comics, like it was like Andy Sanford was there, and he hadn't moved to New York yet. So he was still living in Atlanta, or maybe he had just moved to New York. But just to see the way that guy was like treated, and then to also see that he was like approachable, was huge to me. And I was like, I really want to figure whatever he has figured out. I want to figure that out for myself, and I want to get up here. And then when I was presented with the opportunity, it was like, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. And I just went, and it was great. And then I was in Atlanta for another about 3 years, and then moved to New York, and I've been there for about 5 years. And then we just recently moved to Philly, and I'm really excited once the pandemic's over, because Philly is Helium, which is an amazing club. I can't wait to, you know, get working there, hopefully.
How did it go from Atlanta to New York? Because we talked about this off mic, but the listeners have heard the story a million times. Savannah and I were just about to move to New York. What was that transition like, going from, you were telling us about the Jacksonville to Atlanta thing, but the Atlanta thing to New York, because
it's different.
Like, my whole thing is like, okay, I've been doing comedy on and off really since 2009, when I did my first couple open mics. And then with my drinking and drug abuse, like, I kind of took dips in actually performing. There are times, I've told this story before, and you'll get a kick out of this because you and Buck are close, but there are times where I'd get hammered in like 2015, like in the worst part of my alcoholism. I'd get hammered and I would text Buck at like 2 a.m, like, hey man, I really got to get back into stand up. Like, what's going on? He's like, we're at Rain Dogs every Monday. We've been at Rain Dogs every Monday. Like,
that's him, dude.
And I would like,
he has no patience for it because he's like, the amount of work he puts in to be so kind to people he doesn't know, but then once they're like in front of his face, he's like so standoffish because he's like, I don't want to deal with you. I've done everything for you. It's all here for you.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. For you. Yeah.
Go, it's right here.
Show up.
Leave me alone. Do the thing. That's like his whole thing, and I appreciate it. And it was, like I said, when we started, it was not that. The average age in Jacksonville comedy, I mean, I'm not even like no, I don't even want to make a joke about this, but it like probably was 45. Like it was like every comedian was like a casual, I have a job and the interesting thing about me, I do stand-up comedy. And they would like, they basically were just doing it to cheat on their wives is like what it felt like. It was like all these bar shows with these old men, and then like, and then children show up. You know, I was like 21 when I started coming up, and I'm friends with all these like older men, and the first time in my life, and I'm just like, what's up, fellas? And they like, you know, initially were like, so like, who the fuck is this guy? And then I was kind of like, as far as I did it, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of understand their relationship to what they want this to be and what I want it to be. And, you know, I tried
versus people who really want to do it.
Yeah, but more like, it was more just like young to older, you know. It's like, I get that now that I have a kid, you know, my relationship to comedy, it's like, I don't really want to navigate a scene. I just want to go do a show. And it's like, I don't really want to have to be friends with the people I want to do. I just want to be able to stand up. And it's like, hey, oh, you book, oh, sure, so I'll show up. But like when you were younger, I was like, I wanted everything to be like the way like a scene would be. It was like, we need to set this up, and we could have like writers workshops, and we can do this, and we'll hang out at this open mic. And it was like, there was no hanging out. It was like most people didn't like each other. The people who did like each other was like probably because they like did the same drugs, or like both knew they were cheating on the, you know what. So it was like, it wasn't very much like, oh, that's the Jacksonville comedy scene. It was just like people who do comedy in Jacksonville.
Okay.
And I started a terrible show. I say terrible, it was great, but like I started the Jacksonville Comedy Collective, which is like morphed into like, you know, what it is now, which is just like a couple shows that under that umbrella. But I had started that. It was a show I had done because I came from a really weird background. I always loved the stand up, like we talked about, but I was friends with musicians. Everyone I had lived with, my roommate was a musician. My other roommate, you know, they were dating, and she was the manager. So I would always go to bands, and I hadn't seen stand up in Jacksonville. I was like aware of the Comedy Zone, but I felt like that was something professionals did. I didn't think that an open mic was, I don't know. I didn't really understand how comedy worked. I thought comedy.
Well, you would be correct. Just to interrupt real quick, you would be correct on that assumption still to this day. The Comedy Zone is
they don't have
separate.
They don't have the
Jackson.
Yeah,
which is
still like that. It's wild.
I've been in scenes in South Florida, Oklahoma City. I've gone up to New York. All the major, like a lot of the major clubs know that their influx of talent comes from the local scene.
Yeah,
Jacksonville, they're not having it.
The way the owner runs, you know, the Comedy Zone is very much a business, and I think there's something to be said. I mean, I could talk about that. That could have its own chapter. I mean, because like I'm banned from the Comedy Zone, and I've had my history. Yeah, I've had my own history with the owner of the Comedy Zone. But like now that I'm older, and now that I'm like watching so many historic clubs close, like the Atlanta Punchline, like all these clubs that are like, that's a landmark club. That's one of the best, oldest clubs since boom. And then you see like them close and fall by the wayside, even before COVID. This isn't like COVID related. Like the Jacksonville Comedy Zone is like fine, and it's not because so like what he's doing.
Business, yeah,
exactly. Like what he's doing works. So it's like his methods have their, you know, like
creative drawbacks.
Yeah, but like at the end of the day, he's employing people. He's, paying comedians. He's does the things the way he does. But yeah, like I'm banned from the Comedy Zone because when I started there, well, before, like, just to get back to how I started, I had not done stand up, and then I had done a couple house shows, just like for people drinking, and they were like, you do some stand up comedy, and I had like, I don't even think we had a mic or anything, and I was just like the shitty jokes I had.
Grab the remote control
at the time, stuff like that. I remember I used to back when everybody would play like Rock Band or Guitar Hero, when they had the mic, if you paused the game, the mic would still work. I had the mic plugged in.
I remember that.
Yeah, I had the mic, so I would be like, well, we don't have a PA, but here I do this, and so I have a shitty, and it sounded like reverby because it was supposed to sound like an empty club in the video game, and so I would do it that way, and I would just but I never like thought I would be able to do like a real show. I didn't think that was. I thought that the way stand-up worked mostly was that they were like actors or entertainers, like professionally, and then they would like do stand-up, which like isn't that wrong.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sadly, that's actually still kind of what happens.
How it is, but like I didn't realize that you could like be an open micer and like figure out stand-up and then get work, and then I'm gonna move to LA and then have a career. I didn't realize that was what it was. I thought it was just like performers, and then they would get Comedy Central would be like, oh, come. I didn't really understand the full scope of it. And so the first comedian I ever saw in Jacksonville was Herman Nasworth. Okay. And Herman was doing, I don't know how it happened, but he was doing a variety show in the old Underbelly. I can't even say the old Underbelly because the new Underbelly is closed, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, there was this old place called Underbelly that then became a big venue. But before that, it was a clothing store. And in the back of the clothing store, they used to have shows in 5 Points. It was right. I think it's a gourmet dog place or something now, but it's like right on that strip in 5 Points. And they would have bands back there. And there's a record label called Infinitesimal that was like a local record label, and they would put on a variety show. And at one of these, and my friends' bands would play there, and I had gone to it before. And this particular one, Herman was doing stand up, and he is the first comedian I'd ever seen that was like not. I had seen Jim Gaffigan
to stand up.
Yeah, I had seen Jim Gaffigan. I had seen Kyle Cease and Dimitri Martin at UNF, and I'd seen Jim Gaffigan at the Florida Theater. So like I knew I'd seen stand up before live, but I had never seen it at the open mic level or like the local level.
Yeah,
and I saw Herman, and he bombed like really hard, and he was like really hard, and because he was like he was in between bands, like it's gonna go bad.
Oh,
but
I've done that before. I've done stand up in between bands.
Sometimes it's either great or it's terrible. There's like no like, oh, it's okay, and so he's bombing, and I didn't think he was bombing. Like in retrospect, he was bombing and like having a really bad bomb. Like a bomb where you're like not accepting it the entire time bomb, which is like the worst kind. And I came up to him afterwards, and I was like, man, because I was the only comedian. I was like, if this guy leaves, I have no idea what he does. Where does he go during the week? What is his life like? How did this happen? Let me know how this happened. And so I went up to him, and I was like way over familiar. And I was like, man, that was amazing. Like, and he had just, worst set of his life. And I was like, that's amazing. How did you, who are you? What is this? And he was like, he literally said like, dude, get away from me. Like, you gotta stop, go away. Like, wow. I thought he was going to like hit me in the face. And I was like, no, I need to know what do you do? How do you do this? Is there another show? Have you done other shows? And he told me about Ginger's, which is it was at the beach, and it was a mic, and he was like, he told me about Ginger's, and I feel like maybe Lynch's, which was like another weekly show at the beach. And he told me it was Wednesdays, I believe. And I was like,
those bars survived COVID.
Oh, Ginger's will survive the apocalypse, dude. That's gonna be like some Fallout 3 shit. Like it's gonna be open somehow.
They don't do shows there anymore, but they're still there. Those bars are still there.
Good. Okay. I'm happy to hear that. But anyway, like, so then from that day on, I was at every single show I was aware of in Jacksonville. Like, it was like I would get depression if I didn't get up. I was like, oh, it's been like, oh, if I had to miss Ginger's for whatever reason, I would be so sad and like, just like oh, I didn't do stand up this week. And then from there on, it was that. But then we started, then I started a Jacksonville Comedy Collective, which was just, I just wanted to put up every comedian, and it was a 3-hour long show. So it was like every comedian, and I catered to every whim. So if like someone was like, I'm a featured Jake, I do 30, I'd be like, good, you do 30. And it was like a 3-hour show with like 15 comedians and a band. And it was like, so, but at the time it was like, because there had never really been an independent show in Jacksonville. So it was like, it really kind of, people rallied around it, and it had like a following. People would come to it, and it was good, except it just went on forever. So it was like people would come in and come out, and you'd watch a comedian, you'd leave for an hour, come back, and it's still happening. And, you know, and every comedian was like, you know, this is too long, or they get mad. But that's how it started. And then that was who I was then, was like very much unorthodox and wanting to do things the way I thought that they should be done, which was more like from a music standpoint and from more like bands and that's what it was. And then when I left for Atlanta, I had started a number of shows by then. And then when I left, it was like, that's what Jacksonville was left with. And then it was Buck took over pretty much. And
because Buck's really
made it what it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it's that scene that you were describing earlier about how it was just, you know, some older guys, a couple younger guys, and everyone just kind of went on their ways. It wasn't a real scene.
Yeah,
well,
it's all Buck.
It's a real scene. Like,
I feel that every time I'm home. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like everybody goes out to eat together and stuff.
Yeah,
and
we've got 5 or 6 shows a week that are open
awesome.
mics.
Yeah.
I think some of the comics are a little too welcoming of some of the people. Like,
well, it's like when you don't have to wait to get on a mic, it's like, it's going to be that way. You know, you're going to end up being friends with some weirdos. And that's just because the nature of the size of the scene, you know, like in New York, people can be extremely standoffish because spots are scarce. Whereas like another bigger, like even in Atlanta, it's like you can be welcoming, but also like not associate with somebody because of there's enough people where it's like you don't have to be friends with everybody. But in Jacksonville, it's like you kind of have to be friends with everybody.
Well, and it's weird too, because when I had Stephen Baker on, we talked about this, because I always looked at comedy, because with what happened to me and everything moving forward, comedy is, obviously I don't have kids, I'm not married, comedy is my life, which I'm sure you can relate to some extent. But it was weird because sometimes you get these guys that would come in and they would like get wasted and get on stage. And in my head, I'm like, you thought you were just going to riff for 5 minutes? Like you thought, oh, I'm the funny guy at the office, I'll get drunk and riff.
Yeah.
And Stephen Baker was the one who pointed out, he's like, man, it's like karaoke. Like some people take it real
100%.
seriously.
Yeah.
And some people don't give a shit.
That's great. That's how I explain it a lot of times.
And I had never thought of it that way, because I would get mad sometimes at like Crespo, and I'd be like, why are you like being like, fuck this guy. Like he just wasted all of our time. Like, fuck him.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's not like that, man. Like you gotta calm down.
You need him. You need like, you know, 6 comics to have a show. And it's like, if you only have 20 comics, you're not gonna be able to round them up there all the time.
Well, and you need a person who's gonna bring the office to the show to watch them bomb in order for us to get some sort of exposure.
Yeah, that's always been Jacksonville's problem, I feel like, is there's never been a groundswell of college kids where it's like because it's like Jacksonville is kind of a college town.
It's one of the biggest
sort of
cities in the country.
Yeah, and it's never, I feel like the scene has never lended itself to that. I feel like it's always people who,
really weird that you bring that up.
It's people that it's people that like want to do, it's people that would do comedy regardless, but like I feel like a lot of scenes make it easier for people to do comedy. And so it's like you're always going to have the people you're always going to have, but like you need to make it easier. And I feel like Chris Buck's done the best job I've seen, but like I don't know what, because I've never been at I've never like hung out at UNF. I don't really think I don't think you hang out at UNF. I think it's a commuter school.
Yeah, exactly. It's a commuter
It's not
school,
like it's like they have events, but they're not. I don't know. Yeah, it just doesn't feel like a lot of other college towns where
because like there's Gainesville and Tallahassee where like
like they do they're students and then they graduate.
Scenes,
exactly. And it's like the scenes are young and they're constantly young, and there's like a pretty big turnover, but they somehow things stay together when people leave. And
yeah,
Jacksonville never had
stand up. We don't. A lot of the shows that we do, and you're familiar with this because you guys started it, but a lot of the shows that we have now are Riverside, Five Points. Like we don't really do anything towards the beach really that much anymore. It's all inland. So that you're going to get a lot of hipsters, a lot of older people, a lot of barflies, stuff like that, which is great. But at the same time, like there's an influx of college students every year, and they all are towards the beach. They're all towards the coast. Yeah. And we just don't, but it's good because a lot of times they make for terrible audience members.
Oh yeah. College. Yeah, exactly. That's very true.
They get wasted and want to be a part of the show. And it's like, no, man, like this is.
Yeah. Some of the best clubs are in college towns. But they have this like standing relationship with the student body and its interest. Like Comedy Club on State in Madison is like notoriously good. And then the Comedy Attic in Bloomington, and Bloomington is like a college town. Like there's no like reason you would be in Bloomington unless you're in college. Like there are townies, but like it's like Athens, Georgia, where it's like you can live in Athens. It's a fine place to live, but like more chances are you're in college. Yeah, exactly. And they have a really good scene, and a really good club. And I don't know. That's how they run it, I guess. But Jacksonville's also never really had a club that was like ran by the scene.
Yeah,
they've
never
like
had
the
anything
clubs
really conducive to the creative process. That's not. It's always a business.
Yeah, I mean, it's always booking outside, people.
Outside
like they're always. So it's never had like a friendly relationship with a club owner, and I don't know. I don't know if that's Jacksonville.
You got banned.
Yeah, I got banned. Well, I got banned for dumb reasons. I should have got banned for a number of reasons, but I got banned because I moved.
Really?
The owner was like, well, he had this idea that you do the workshop, you take the class, you do the workshop.
I'm sorry, we never got into that. Did you? Okay.
Yeah. I was in it for a little while, and so you do the workshop, and then after a few years of like serfdom, he would recommend you to the folks at the Comedy Zone, and they book you, and you'd be a road feature. That was like the idea there. It was like you pay your dues here, and then I'll move you to the road.
Yeah.
And I was like immediately like, well, I can't wait. I'm 20, 21, 22. I'm not waiting for this guy to be like, you should go. So I was like doing shows all over, doing all this stuff. And then so when I decided, I was like, I'm moving. I'm in that. He was like, tried to make an example of me. And he was like, well, the man, he knew what he did. He's banned. And so it's like, I've never worked there since, but I've also never tried. Yeah. It's like, I don't really care. I don't have any interest. If I'm going Jacksonville, I'd rather do a show with my friends than like get, $400 to feacher the comedy. Like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, it was like, I should have been banned for so many other things that I had done there, but it was, I didn't have a lot of respect at the time for a lot of the people that were in the workshop. I made some friends that I love so many people there, but there was a lot of people that I was like, that everyone was like, oh, that's that guy, and I was like, well, no, that guy fucking sucks, and he needs to know it every day. And that was kind of my mentality.
That's awesome, man, because I feel the same way when I'm on shows with some of the Comedy Zone people. I love a lot of them, but then there's some of them where I'm like,
some of them are sweethearts, and it's like even if your insight is never gonna be, I'm gonna accept it as part of my comedy. I respect you, and I think you're a good person. I like you as a person. And then there were other dudes where it's like, I know you don't respect me, and I know you have no idea how way I feel about this. So I had no respect for him, and that was because part of the youth, but also because of it's just such disrespect from both parties, So it's like, I'm not going to intake that. It's going to come back at you.
Yeah.
And that was very much the way I operated when I was, young awesome. And in Jacksonville. Was just, and I'd never done that before too. It was like, because I'm not someone I hate conflict, and I'm someone who's very, quiet. And then this was the first time anything ever mattered to me. And so it's like, when you were trying to redefine comedy for me at that time. I was like, dude, I'll fucking no, I'll fight you. Like you're an idiot. And that was very much how I felt about it. And now in hindsight, it's like, I'm honestly like, I obviously would have handled things differently, but like, I'm pretty proud and like impressed that that's who I became because of that.
That's awesome.
And that, you know, I was a shithead for sure. Like I was a shithead, but I was 21. You're fucking 40. Like you need to understand that like, this isn't, it's always going to happen. There's always going to be 21-year-olds who think they know everything and think you're lame, you know? And it's like, if you understood that and actually had like some self-awareness to think like, maybe I am a cheese dick because I'm an old man, then like you're cool. That's all it took.
Then you're self-aware.
Then you're self-aware and you're good. And it's like, of course, I don't rail against anyone who's older just under the blanket. It's like, I don't know. So now when I see people who I know they're me, I'm like, I'll see people every once in a while. I'm like, you're me at 21. And I love them. I'm like, God bless you. Even if they're a dick to me, I'm like, good for you, dude. Good for you, dude. Good. I hope I'm happy you're happy. And now I'm very much not that guy. And I'm very polite. And I won't say a bad word about anybody, you know. Like I just like I said, we like stand up, you know.
Yeah. So when you got to New York, did you, because like we talked about earlier, that was like my dream. Was it a culture shock? Was it, when it comes to comedy, was it like, oh, I'm going to move like, what was your mindset? Like, I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to get discovered and everything's going to be right with the world.
Yeah, I guess some part of that, because I'd been in Atlanta for a couple years and I was really happy with where I was in Atlanta. I was like, you know, I would call myself like, at that time I was like a local figure, you know, like I would be in the paper. I would think people were aware of me just because of how often I would get up at Star Bar, which is like a really good show. And then I was getting up everywhere. I was getting up so many times a week, so many times. And like some of these shows are good. And, you know, I would open for big people. And I just think I had a pretty solid groundswell of awareness and reputation. So when I moved, my thinking wasn't so much that, oh, I'm going to be a big deal in New York. It was more that Atlanta had a really good way of being a stepping stone to New York or LA, where a lot of comedians would live in Atlanta and it was a great scene, really just an amazing scene to come up in. And then they would move to LA and then you'd be like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. They're in LA. And they would like do things and be, you know, achieve some level of success, or same with New York. And so I had been in Atlanta for enough time where I felt like, okay, it's probably time for me to do this because I need to give the opportunities I have now to someone else in Atlanta. So someone else can step up and they can feel like this and they can feel these shoes. And it wasn't so much that I felt like I was going to be in New York and keep my clout, you know, like take the credits with me and now I'm in New York. So, you know, I'm a pretty big deal. Like didn't have that level of thinking. It was more like, okay, I did it in Atlanta. I'll take what I can transfer from Atlanta to New York and we'll see how it goes in New York. And it was great. I loved my time in New York, but it more so shapes you in a way where you figure out like what you really want and what you really like, because things come real quick. Like if you do want to be a joke writer on a late night show, you got to do it. You got to do it even if you're not getting paid. You have to do packets. You have to do all these things, all these, you know, unfun things that not unfun. I say unfun. I don't want to do that, but you have to do these things as like homework that might not even get you anything. You just in New York just tests you in a way where you go, okay, what do you really want? And it'll keep asking you, what do you really want until you actually say, okay, here's what I really want. Yeah. And then it's not gonna, if you actually are honest with yourself, it'll give it to you. But if you're not, it's not like you go, I want to be a TV writer. It's like, okay, put the work in. Yeah. You can be it. Yeah. You can do it. It's just, it takes a long time and it takes a lot of work. And I was like up there and I was like, I want to be a TV writer. I want to do this. And then it just became so clear, like I did not want to be a TV writer. I did not want to write. Yeah. I did not want to write, come into an office, write topical jokes and all this stuff. And then so it was like, okay, well, I want to be a stand-up. And it's like, you can do stand-up in New York. You can definitely be a stand-up in New York, and you can definitely get famous by doing it. But it just takes a long time, depending on how good you are. Like if you're amazing, you're amazing. Go up there. You're great. If you're great, you're great. And everyone's going to go, this guy's great. But if you're like, me, like I'm fine. I'm fine. If you see a show and I'm on it, you're going to be like, that guy's good. He's fine. But I'm not going to you don't want my face on a shirt. You don't want fucking me. And so it's like, it's going to just take longer. It's going to take where someone might take 2 years. It might take 5 years. And if you're fucking garbage, it might take 25 years. Those people exist in New York. There's people who are like bad, but they've made quite a nice little career for themselves because they've put the time in. And it's like, you don't want to take that away from them because they've paid their dues, Yeah. And so it's like that. And I came to the point where I'm happy I was in New York. I met my wife in New York. I met all my friends in New York. I loved my time there, but it just became clear that like, even not with COVID, it's like, I don't want to make, like when I was making sacrifices of my own, like my personal life, it's whatever to live in New York. But like now that I have a family, it's like, I don't want to live that New York life with a family. It's different.
It's interesting you say that because I've had people on here before, comics, like we had Dan Venti on from San Diego. He lived out there for 9 years, like grinding, doing comedy and stuff. And then it got to the point where he just kind of was like, I love my girlfriend. Like, I just want to like live like a happy life. Like this isn't like, this isn't fun anymore.
It's not. Yeah. It gets to a point where it just becomes like comedy always feels like high school, and to some degree with the way that people interact and just the gossip, going to school, you go to a show, who's there? These people are there. It does feel communal in a way. And then at a certain point in New York, it's like, because New York has kind of a constant turnover of young people coming in from different scenes. So it's like, it's always a little younger than you after a certain point.
Yep. And we're at that point, Jake.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like, I don't really fucking want to hang out with 22-year-olds, at a bar. And
especially because in my head, I'd talk be like, to these fuckers were smart enough to come here when they were 22. I waited until I was 33. Man.
The move is either go and you're like an 18-year-old millionaire for some reason, because it's also super expensive.
Yeah.
And either that or move when you're like just have so much clout that you're undeniable, and a lot of comedians move from Chicago. Chicago is the best. Chicago's the best scene that's not New York or LA. And when comedians move from Chicago, one, they're very good. And two, they have an enormous amount of contacts. So there's like this animosity from people who aren't from Chicago in New York, because it's like, no, the Chicago comedians here, they're going to get all the spots. And it's like, they probably are. And it's because they're good and they know everyone. You're an asshole. And we've seen you be bad for a while. And it's like, you might be fine, but we remember when you were terrible. Yeah. And so it's like, if you start in New York, you have that stigma of like, we remember when you were awful, and you, it's going to take a long time for me to forget that and be like, oh, you are good. I like you, and so there's like always these things that you never know how someone feels about you. And this guy might be like, oh, that guy's amazing. And this person may be like, oh, no, he's an idiot. He's a dick. And so there's just so much things happening in New York.
Well, not only that, but comedy itself is so subjective.
It's so subjective. And New York has like 45 different scenes within itself as a scene. It's like, there's the clubs in Manhattan. There's the clubs in Upper Manhattan. There's the Queens. There's like the Astoria comedians. There's the Brooklyn comedians.
A gay community.
There's gay community. There is a gay comedy scene Queens. In New York. Oh yeah, the Queens. Yeah. I mean, there's probably a gay scene in Queens. That's just Queens gay comedians. I'm totally serious. That's more than likely the case. And it's just like, so you have like standing with some places where it's like, Oh yeah, I like those guys that they all live in like South Brooklyn. I like going down there. And then it's like, oh, I like going to Astoria. And it's like, oh yeah, I gotta hang out more and this. And it's just so many things that like it's so active that you're like, I can't keep track of all this and I want it to just be simple. But then once you're like, well, I'm just gonna take it easy, then it's like you're gonna get passed up for the things that you want because there's going to be people hustling their brains out, and that's always going to be the case because this is the influx, and that's just what it felt like to me. And I was like, I just really want to be comfortable, and I just like doing stand up, and I'm fine being a middle act. I'm not trying to get, like if I get famous, I want it to be for something I don't mind doing. It's like I would love to have I'd love to have a podcast, but like I don't really care about anything. I don't really want to do that. And so it's like, but then also I don't have this grand delusion where I'm like, but I still deserve it. It's like, I know I'm taking it easy. I know there's people working harder for me, and that's good. I hope they get it. I don't want, once you like have that, where you're like, it's okay that person got it because they worked harder than me and they're probably better than comedy than me. And that's like where I'm at now. I've made peace with it. But I still like doing stand up.
See, that's awesome that you've made peace. Like
it sounds so beta, and it sounds like such a loser thing to say.
But it
like
so
it really
much
is.
Sense
I don't
when
care.
You've done what we've like, you more so than me. But like doing these shitty bar shows and like going to mics and getting heckled for nobody, like for no reason. And there's
putting yourself
there.
Through that,
and then just to be like. To get to a point like Dan talked about on his episode, like you're talking about now, to get to a point where it's like, no, I'm good where I'm at. Like I love doing stand-up. I'll keep doing stand-up, but I'm good right here.
And I don't want the responsibility of being a headliner and having to put out different content and having to be somebody that's public. Like I see the people in my friend group that have become figures, and they've become like, oh, you're like, they're professionals. This is their job. This is their career. And it's as much as I like looked at that, and been like, that's what I want. Now I just see like what it actually takes. And it's like, I'm okay with what I have, like if it ends up happening, I'm happy for it. But, I'm not going to like make sacrifices to try and get something that I'm not even sure I want.
Yeah. Especially because you have, you're married now with the baby. So it's definitely a little different than like,
I don't want to.
With my situation, it was weird because starting the podcast and like pursuing comedy, it was weird because like when I first started, I had a lot of jokes that I wouldn't even touch anymore. Back in 2009, like when I had just stopped playing football.
Oh, me too.
But I had just stopped playing football, so it was all like this bro-y frat guy humor, like super. Some of it was super like shock jock kind of shit, and I would never do any of that now. But it's weird because. Like we were talking about earlier, as I've grown in comedy and now that I feel like I'm saying something with because stand-up got me through a lot of shit when I was younger, and still does. And to be able to share stories about stuff that has happened to me, like terrible things, like friends overdosing and like almost dying and all that, but to try and put a funny twist on it, to me, that's the whole reason. Is it's very much like, oh, I want to keep doing this because I want people to know that like everything's gonna be all right. But like you're saying, like if you get to a point, like if I were to get to a point where I got married and had kids and stuff, eventually you have to be like, all right, man, like now you have to make a decision. Like, what are you going to do?
And there are comedians I know that, have kids and make it work and all this stuff, but it's like, I don't know. I don't want to chance it. I don't want to risk it.
Well,
and
that's awesome.
That's like just where I'm at right now. And,
well, speaking of, go ahead.
No, that's fine. No,
I was going to say, speaking of being in New York, living in New York, when we first were talking about you doing the show, you're like, well, I don't have a lot of like drinking stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, no, that's fine. Because I knew a couple stories about that you've done.
Yeah, just because I don't drink doesn't mean I don't make bad decisions. I still make bad decisions.
Which is awesome. You are a huge basketball fan. For those people who don't know, you are
big time.
Which is hilarious because you're a smaller guy with red hair, and it's very funny. I'm
kind of tall though. Let's not come. And I play basketball. I'm not I always say I'm not a little guy.
When I say smaller, it's in comparison to how wide I am. But
yeah.
You're actually very good at basketball. I see a lot of the stuff you post. What was that clip you had about when you bricked it on that was on live television, wasn't
Oh
it?
yeah, dude, that was wild. That was a couple years ago now. I was on tour with my friend Joel Wachowski, and we had tied it because we played basketball together every Sunday. We have a game for comedians and entertainers and people in New York, and it's a great game. And we decided we were going to go, do the road, and just hit all my old haunts before I had moved to New York, because it's hard to get out of New York. It's expensive to leave. It's expensive to be there, but then it's more expensive to leave because you're not there making money. You're so I was like, well, we'll do a month on the road, and we were in Louisville. Yeah, we were in Louisville, Kentucky, and my friend Renan Hirschberg is another great comedian, fantastic comedian. He is from Louisville, and he has local news contacts. So we got on the local news to promote our show that night, and they had oh dude, I wish I knew the dude's name. They had an old Louisville basketball, like a beloved guy who led him to the tournament one year.
Yeah.
And he was the first guest. He was like promoting a basketball instructional videos. And then they were going to like surprise us. And because we were the second guest, and they were going to have us play him. And he's like old, but like he would still wreck us. Like it would have been, but he's smart enough to know, no, I'm not doing that. So he does his segment, and then he leaves. And they were still having to interview us, and they didn't have anything. So what they did, they had a local group of high school kids that were like on a field trip to like see how the news works. And so they're like, hey, so these comedians, they're on tour or something, and they play basketball for some reason, and here anyway, play some high school kids. And it's like live TV at like TV. It was like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m, and they're like, all right, and it's like super cold, and they're just like, all right, play these high school.
It's crazy too, because it's like, oh, they're it's not like a traveling circus. Like we like to play basketball, but they're comedians that play basketball. Check it out.
We're like the Harlem Globetrotters or some shit, and it's like, no, it's just like we just like loosely play basketball. It's just like in our bio, and yeah, so they would play these like, raring to go high school kids, and yeah, I mean, I shoot a shot that was like pretty deep, and we're in a garage, so it hits a garage door opener like at its full arc, like on live
It looked
TV.
like it was tracking. It was going in.
Oh, it's going in. To this day, I'm like, that's going in. It was definitely going in. I mean, it's like, that's my thing, and it's like then I shot extremely high arcing shots, and it hit a garage door opener. And then all my friends, when the clip got out, my friend Chris Daniels, another fantastic comedian, he like cut the clip and like took the clip, got it off the site. And it's like so funny to watch.
So you are a huge basketball. You're a Nets fan, though, as everybody knows.
Yeah, I became a Nets fan. My wife and I we lived in Brooklyn. We met in Brooklyn, and we used to go a lot of dates on to Nets, because they used to be. Some of you don't remember, they used to not have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. They used to be pretty bad, and we could go and get tickets for like $12, stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah, they were super cheap for a little while. And then they got, as they got, more, they got kind of expensive. And then when they actually got Katie and Kyrie, then it was like, okay, I can't afford this. I can't afford any of this. So a couple $100. They went from being like, in like 2016, they were probably, if they were playing a team that wasn't a highlight team, you could probably get single digit tickets. And then now a couple $100.
Like Charlotte or something.
If they're playing Charlotte, you could probably go for like $6.
Damn.
$9. Yeah, it was it's a great stadium, and it's fun. Like, and the concessions are super expensive, but like you got your ticket, you're whatever. You got your ticket on StubHub, and it's like so cheap. So we would go all the time. And then we would go all the time, and we still watch them. But like my wife's out now because she doesn't recognize anybody, because it's like the only person, it's like Joe Harris and Spencer Dinwiddie are the only people she recommends, or recognizes. Everyone else is like, I'm like, oh, that's Blake Griffin. And she's like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
she said it's like the Avengers, and it's like, she's not wrong. It is like,
that's true.
All these people that we've played over the years, they're now all Nets, and it's like, well, okay.
That's a good point. She makes a good point. It's weird. We were talking.
She's not wrong
on the sports podcast that I do, but it was funny when they got Blake Griffin. It's like some people were like, "It's over, punch their ticket." It's like, have you seen Blake Griffin?
He's fine. Yeah,
he's not even fine.
I feel like Jeff Green will start over.
That's Blake Griffin. Exactly what we were saying. I was like, he's not better than Blake Griffin today is not better than Jeff Green today.
Nah. Jeff Green's banged up, but I feel like Jeff Green can get it. He can get after it. And Blake Griffin, he's a little washed up, but he's still
little, yeah.
Yeah. I actually met Blake Griffin in New York doing stand-up. I watched him do stand-up, and he was pretty good.
Was he really?
He was pretty good. Yeah, he was pretty good. Obviously I'd be the first person to be like, it was whatever.
Yeah.
But he was pretty good. His bits were good.
Stage presence.
And he was in abundance.
Okay.
He's not that charismatic, you know, but stage presence off the charts. And then his bit, like his self-awareness of like what you'd actually want a basketball player to talk about. It was like, oh dude, yes. It wasn't
for
like,
real? So it's very
I'm
like
7 foot tall and I'm real big and I'll do. It was like, he told this story about, he's like, people think basketball players are smart. He's like, he told some story about someone ate 7 hot dogs before a game because they thought the game was later. And it's like, yes, that's what you want. You want the shit that no one can like talk about except for you.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because it's like, that shit happens, but he would never say that because it's like, you don't want to say that. That's going to get the media involved, you know? So it's like that type of shit was so funny.
This is going to get clipped and it's going to go all over ESPN. They're going to be like, Blake Griffin talk shit about.
Yeah. Because he didn't say a name or anything, but like, if he does release a half hour, I'll watch it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
If he releases an hour, I won't watch it. But if it's a half hour, I'll watch it.
He
was a nice dude.
You're not a fan of the Knicks, though, the New York Knickerbockers.
Yeah.
Maybe not really. I don't know if I
was a Knicks fan growing up. My dad is a loose fan of Georgetown University. So when they got Patrick Ewing, we were like casual Knicks fans during that era. And the story,
do you want to tell it?
Yeah. Should I say what happened and then say So I actually got a free ticket to go to a Knicks game. I had never been to a Knicks game in my entire time in New York because
I didn't know the ticket was free.
The ticket was free. It was a gift. So what happened was my buddy James knew someone who worked for the owner of the Bucks. So it's like she would get the tickets, give them to James. James couldn't go, so he was like, "But you know who? I bet someone would want this. I'm going to get some." And he got me. I had never been to a Knicks game because the Knicks, even though the Knicks were as bad as the Nets, Knicks tickets like never dropped below $50. Even when they were terrible, going to MSG was always like, I can't spend $50 a ticket. That's just too much. And I never went. I always wanted to go. And then when James was like, "Hey, do you want to go to this game? It's one ticket." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go by myself. I don't care. I'll just want to watch the game." It was Bucks, Knicks, because the owner had the tickets and, so it was
Giannis Antetokounmpo in town.
Giannis going off at MSG. I was like, yeah, I'll go to that. And I go, and we're sitting pretty decent seats, not like, whatever seats. They were nice. MSG is incredible. It's like, it really is like the best basketball stadium I've ever seen. And I think it is like the Mecca. But before I had gone, because I had in the past, made jokes about James Dolan, the owner of the Knicks. And, because when he got into it with Charles Oakley, that was like when it turned for a lot of people. James Dolan, the owner of the Knicks, got into a fight with a former Knick.
A beloved Knick.
A beloved former Knick, Charles Oakley. And it just became clear that like James Dolan is like a rich kid's son and like doesn't like, it's just a whatever. And
it's almost, not to cut you off, but it's almost like we were talking about earlier with the Jacksonville Comedy Zone. Like he's obviously in it to make a profit. He doesn't really care about basketball at all.
Well, it's also like he'd be fine. It's like, I'm aware all of these teams are owned by billionaires. I'm not like it needs to be it needs to be people of color owning these. Like I understand they're all problematic billionaires that own the teams. But James Dolan has a way of like he's like in a band and like the band plays stuff. It's like you can have your interests, but you don't get to be a public figure, man.
Yeah.
So the public opinion of him was very low. So like a lot of people, I made jokes about James Dolan, and I had previously in the past, I was like, I had said something like, "Hey, everybody, like, for me, my birthday, Venmo me, and I'll buy the Knicks," or something like that, something about buying the Knicks. And then when I finally went to my first Knicks game, I had tweeted, I was like, I said, going to my first Knicks game, I'm gonna fist fight James Dolan until he sells me the team, or something like that.
Yeah,
and
throwaway kind of
something about how I'm going to a Knicks game, I'm gonna fight James Dolan, and it's like, like who the fuck cares? If you're going to a Jags game, you're like, oh, I'm going to a Jags game, I'm gonna rip Shad Khan's mustache of his dumb face. Like you're fine. It's a stupid thing to say.
Friends are friends of this program. We don't support that whatsoever.
Yeah, it's like whatever. Yeah, but anyway, so I go to the game, and I'm sitting there by myself, and they're doing a t-shirt toss, which at MSG, the t-shirt toss of the Nets are so janky before, because it's literally just throwing them.
Yeah.
At the fucking Knicks game, it's like they have like, instead of 8 people on the court throwing them, it's like an entire like team of people dropping t-shirts from the rafters, like things from on little parachutes, all this shit.
Oh, they don't have the cannon? They don't do the
No, they had a cannon. Boy, they had multiple cannons. It was like D-Day. They were just like, on the court. They had so many cannons. But anyway, I catch a shirt, because I'm pretty good at catching a shirt. I'm pretty tall, and I mossed the guy, and I took it down. And I caught a shirt, right? And I'm sitting there, and it's maybe the second quarter. I feel like it was maybe the beginning of the second quarter.
So in your head, there's nothing out of the ordinary. You're just having a good time.
No, yeah, I'm fine. And
meanwhile, behind the scenes.
Yeah, so I catch a shirt, right? I catch a shirt, and I got this blue Knicks shirt, and I'm sitting there, and then someone from like guest services is coming up, and I didn't think anything of it, and then they stopped at me, and I had the t-shirt, and I'm thinking like, oh, sick. I think it's like one of those situations where if you catch the shirt, you might win something else. Okay. Like I thought I had won. I thought I had like won. Oh, you won this
shoot-off
so
contest.
Now you're gonna get now you're gonna go get the shoot. And I looked at the guy, and I thought, you know what, this guy does not seem like he's from fan services. Yeah. And he looks like kind of Russian, and he looks like he's just like all business. And he's like, can you come with me? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And he took me down, and we went to Knicks jail.
I can go. Are we doing a 3-point contest? What's happening?
Well, yeah. And he takes me down, and I realized pretty quickly as we were walking, like, no, I'm definitely going to Knicks jail. Like, this isn't, I didn't win something. If you haven't caught it, I got kicked out of MSG. I'm banned from MSG. And he takes me down to Knicks jail, and he goes, they're like they go, just so we know, we take every threat against any employee very seriously. And I said, wait, you guys consider Dolan an employee? And they like weren't, they were they're not gonna laugh at anything you say. They're very much like whatever. And they said,
did they ask you who you were? How did
they said, can we have your ticket? And it doesn't have my name on it, because it was free. And they go, they were like, kind of like, huh, like realizing like, oh, this is weird. And then they were like, can we take a picture of you? And I said, but can I take a picture with y'all too? Like I was trying to film it so I could be like, look, I got kicked out of MSG. Look at this. Because a lot of people had been kicked out of MSG at that time. It was like when people were saying fire Dolan, they would like find the people who started the chants and they'd kick them out. And the news would cover it. And I was like, well, cool. I want to be like, I want to get that. And they were just like, they took my ticket and they just led me out to 34th Street. And they were just like, yeah, here you go. They took my picture, and I'm probably up on a wall in Knicks jail. Damn. And it was like not really. I just really thought it was such a range of emotions, because it was like, oh, I think I won something. Then it's like, no, you're kicked out. And one of the richest men in New York City wants you dead. I was like kind of worried for a minute
because you said you wanted to fight. You could take James Dolan in a fight.
I think, for the record, James Dolan would beat my ass. Just really? For the record. Oh, he's a billionaire. He eats nothing but like swordfish and fucking.
I see what you're doing there. Yeah, but
uranium. Like his diet alone is like, he's
the great
gotta
Mike
be in better
shape. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah. No, I don't
You
know.
got the length on them. You could. Anyway, I don't want us to get banned from MSG.
Who knows?
I'm planning
Yeah,
on moving to New York.
Yeah, you definitely go to the Knicks. Great organization. They might make the playoffs this year.
They actually will. You now that was kind of a low light when it came to being at a sporting event. You actually had a super big highlight when you came back to Jacksonville a few years. Was it a few?
Oh yeah,
it's a few years ago now.
Yeah, that would have been 2016, 17. Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, so this is before your album was released and everything. You got to throw out the first pitch at our minor league jumbo shrimp game.
The Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp.
Yeah,
that was great.
How did you manage to do that?
A lot of people. I mean, I have a bit about this. I think it's on my album. Maybe it's not on my album, but I have a bit about this. I just say, like, a lot of people ask me, how do you throw out a first pitch? And the answer to that is I just asked.
Yeah.
I just asked somebody. I sent an email to a person. I was like, hey, I'm, local comedian. I live in New York. I've done this and this and then whatever. And he was like, yeah, of course, throw it out. And
you threw your credits around?
Well, yeah. I mean, I just said I was local comedian more than more than my credit. My credit's for whatever. It's like nobody knows what Fox's Laughs is.
So everybody watches. What is it? Deezus and Mero?
That was before that. I hadn't been on that before. That was before that. I was just Fox's Laughs, and I pretty much, it was more that I was a local comedian because I don't think they, they don't do a ton. It's not like, but then again, I've never done it since, so maybe it was.
That's super awesome. Were you nervous?
Yeah, I was there. I mean, you really don't get an idea of how big those stadiums are until you're out there, and even Jacksonville, it's pretty big.
Yeah. People don't realize it.
They brought me up, but they didn't give me any credits or context. This is also in the bit I said, but they go, and now throwing out the first pitch, Jake Head. It's like just a guy, like no local comedian or nothing. And then I looked around and I think people thought I was sick. I think people thought like, oh, this guy is a sick guy. We should probably clap, and that's like what it felt like. And, but yeah, then I had been practicing with my brother, I play wiffle ball, so it's like, I know how to throw a ball. I'm pretty good at throwing a baseball. But yeah, then it was great. It was so much fun. So goofy, but
yeah, that's
so
awesome.
much fun.
To go from highs of getting kicked out of stadium or lows of getting kicked out of stadiums to highs of throwing out first pitches.
Yeah.
You're all over the map.
Yeah. I'm banned from MSG, but I'm welcomed in AA. Oh, AAA. They're AAA now.
AAA, yeah.
How about that?
You did tell me about another story. Because we were talking about getting in trouble, and you're like, well, I've never really had the cops called on me except one time.
Yeah, my one time. Because I grew up in Middleburg, Florida. And
it's a very country area for those of you listening.
Yeah, it's pretty rural. It's like a swamp town. But it's like everyone's a farmer, and it's like, what do you grow? And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, no, you're not. Why you dress like that? It's like, the only time I feel like I did this as a bit when I started or something. I don't remember. Maybe it was like a story. But anyway, when I was like 9, I got the cops because there was like a neighbor that was just a kind of an asshole, and my brother and I we were throwing rocks at squirrels. Which, hold on, I mean, I'm not a sociopath. Our idea was, because we'd been playing a lot of Pokémon, we were going to stun them with the rock. And then catch them, and then teach them to fight. That was our plan,
all, man.
You got to, but to stun them, we threw a rock. When you get a rock thrown at you, you're stunned momentarily. That's like what we thought was going to happen, and then we were going to catch them and then teach them to fight. And I guess what I said, the neighbor was an asshole. This is a pretty reasonable thing to do. Now that I'm thinking about it, I would definitely call the cops. You know what? I'm the villain of the story. You ever do that? You ever realize you're the villain?
Yeah.
I'm the villain. And so we were throwing rocks at squirrels, and this neighbor called, and the neighbor story doesn't really go anywhere. The neighbor
you were 9 and the cops showed up. What do you mean?
Well, the neighbor said that we had hit her house with the rocks, and I didn't think that was the case. So when the cop came, he was like, so did you hit did you hit this house? And I was like, no, we didn't hit this house. I was like tiny John Mulaney. And my brother had said we did. So I think what had happened was my brother had hit the house and I didn't realize that. But then my dad thought I was lying to a cop. He's like, because the cop had said, he goes, well, we found rocks near the house. And I was like, what? Like, it was like a legitimate surprise for me. And then I got grounded, not because I was throwing rocks, but because I lied to the cop. But I actually didn't lie to the cop because I didn't. So that was the whole thing. But yeah.
Do you remember being scared when the cop showed up, or did you?
Terrified. I thought I was going to jail. I thought I was going to prison. You know, it's like you don't. It's like you don't understand what that is as a child. You know, like I they're like a cop has to. You got to come talk to this cop, and it's like what do you mean? And so we, that was whatever. But
damn. Well, that's a fun story. Well, not fun, not at the time, but it's fun.
Yeah, I wish. It's funny. I never really thought that. I still to this day was like that neighbor was an asshole. But you know what?
Now that you're thinking, see, look at that.
Yeah, you know what? That's
Revelations
fine.
Here on X Drinking Buddy.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Jake. Plug everything one more time. Your album, everything that you got going on.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a real pleasure. I gotta go make sure my son is. My wife's been watching him. I think he's asleep. I don't know. But check out Wildcat if you love stand-up comedy. I do it, and I have an album, and it's out there. It's on every
social media.
Yeah. Jake Marshall Head on Instagram. Jake Head _ on Twitter.
Okay.
Jake, at Jake Head. I've tried to buy it a couple times. Some Christian guy, and he doesn't answer DMs.
Yeah, what an asshole.
He hasn't tweeted since
That's the real villain.
Yeah, the real villain at Jake Head.
Everybody tweeted him, but yeah, go check out the album Wildcat. I have it. I've listened to it a few times. I really like it.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, of course, man. I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again for doing the show.
Yeah, man. Good luck when you finally get to New York.
Yeah, right.
When all this is over.
I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, follow me on all social media at Brennan T Comedy. Check out the website, brennantcomedy.com for upcoming dates, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Woo!